Mangwana ni Mwalelepo Fukenjani, Clay Class, Dumelang Vanabe Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show that remains your portal into Africa's most potent stories. You are joined by Ashwin Betty, and you will later be joined by Rorisang Mogojwe, as she says Dumelang from Gaborone, delivering the Botswana Report, which includes the latest on the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 14, which sets the pathway to establishing a constitutional court in that country, as well as the fuel hikes, which have gone up today, and much more coming from there. However, these are some of the top stories we'll be looking at from broader Africa. Iran war disruptions trigger record surge in global oil price forecasts. Nigeria urges caution after violence erupts during protest in South Africa. And ZANU-PF mobilization overshadowed by arrests and disruptions at constitutional hearings. Those are some of the stories we'll be looking at on Africa Good Morning, DSTV 285, GoTV 25, oneup2.com, ntvafrica.my.na, and NTV Africa on YouTube. Keep in mind, when you're writing NTV Africa, that Africa is spelt with a K. Do make sure that you join us and you follow us on social media. It's Africa Good Morning on Facebook. Top stories shortly. Getting into our top stories, stalled oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz and output disruptions caused by the Iran war have pushed analysts to raise annual oil price forecasts by the largest margin recorded in Reuters poll history. A March survey of 38 economists and analysts projects Brent crude will average $82.85 per barrel in 2026, a sharp increase from February's $63.85 forecast before the conflict began. U.S. crude is expected to average 76.78 per barrel, up from 60.38. Both benchmarks have surged about 60% since the conflict started on February 28, with Brent heading for a record monthly rise. The disruption has effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, a key route for roughly 20% of global oil and LNG shipments, forcing Gulf producers to cut output. Analysts warn that continued disruption could push prices significantly higher, with some suggesting Brent could approach $190 if closures persist. Despite expectations of gradual recovery in supply, global inventories remain strained, with OPEC output projected to drop sharply in the second quarter, tightening markets even further. Now, Nigeria's High Commission in South Africa has urged its citizens to remain cautious following violence linked to an anti-illegal immigration protest in Eastern Cape Province. The unrest began during a peaceful march in Kugompo, but escalated after claims that a protester was attacked by a foreign national. Demonstrators then damaged vehicles and looted shops, with authorities confirming that 10 vehicles were set alight. Tensions have been rising following the recognition of a Nigerian community leader, Solomon Ogbonna Eziko, as Ezendi Igbo, East London. While the title is ceremonial within the Igbo community and carries no political authority, some South Africans viewed it as an attempt to assert political power. Local authorities, including Mayor Princess Faku, condemned the violence while acknowledging support for the march's underlying concerns. No arrests have been made. The Nigerian High Commission advised its citizens to limit movement and avoid gatherings. South African officials and Igbo leaders emphasized that the recognition was a private cultural event and called for respect of national laws. In Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF has actively mobilized supporters to attend public hearings for the Constitutional Amendment Bill, proposing to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term limit to 2030. 30. The ruling party transported supporters from various towns, including Beatrice, to hearings held in Dema and Chitungwiza, with some participants submitting written affidavits backing the bill. The hearings exposed divisions within the political landscape as opposition groups struggled to mobilize comparable support and accused the parliamentary committee of sidelining dissenting voices. Former Cabinet Minister David Cottard said there were deliberate efforts to exclude opposing views. Tensions escalated during the hearings with reports of violence, intimidation and arrests. Student leader Denford Sithole, who had spoken against the bill at a meeting in Bulawayo, was led away from the venue by unidentified individuals and later located at a police station after being charged. Here is Denford Sithole with the words that got him apprehended.
Right now, they are very much afraid of airing out their complaint. I'm 100% against those shouting in number 3. We seek to take over power of the people in mandating the president of Zimbabwe. What we are saying is, my submission is informed by the values and principles of the liberation struggle. One man, one vote was at the center of the liberation struggle. And the young people are ready to partake in another liberation struggle if it means that you are going to take away our right to liberation. We also want to elect our leaders because we want our leaders to know that we have mandated them and they all. You have removed, you want to remove the mandate from the citizens. You want to put it to a few power they need. We're going to vote, we're going to be given things, we're going to be given money, we're going to be given loans so that we can elect the president who is voting.
Now, here is Bulawayo Mayor Doug Cottard expressing his frustrations after that same gathering.
Particularly when we get power. There's a saying that says power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And my fundamental objection to this entire amendment bill is founded on that principle. I was a member of COPAC. I was a co-chair of COPAC at the beginning. I was in the deadlock breaking a committee of COPAC. And COPAC resulted in a constitution in 2013, which was a delicate balance that sought to achieve the balance of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Now, I don't have sufficient time today to go into everything in detail, but the fundamental problem with this is that it distorts that balance. It gives the president too much power in appointing senators. It gives the president too much power in appointing judges. It gives the president too much power in appointing people like the Registrar General who are responsible for the voters' roll. It also undermines some of the critical elements of our society. Let's look at chiefs for a moment. Chiefs are our equivalent of royalty. It is hereditary. People in rural areas in particular look up to chiefs. They say that chiefs are the neutral arbiters. As we know in the rural areas, chiefs are responsible for arbitrating. Now, if chiefs can become partisan, they become partisan arbitrators, and that is fundamentally wrong. But my principal objection to this is the extension of terms by 2 years. And I say it for two reasons. Firstly, there is a very clear provision in our Constitution, Section 328, subsection 7, that says that if the effect of any amendment is to give an incumbent further time in office, then it must be subjected to a referendum. And that applies to the president, it applies to MPs, it applies to councils. If the effect, and I'm quoting verbatim, the section says, if the effect is to extend the power, it doesn't matter how you do it, if the effect is to extend, then there has to be a referendum. And whatever we think about this bill, whether we support it or not, those provisions which will extend the office of incumbency, including myself, must be subjected to a referendum. So that's the legal argument, but there's a moral argument as well. And let me speak personally. I was elected to Parliament 3 times, twice to the lower house, once to the Senate, elected, not on proportional representation. In 2023, I was elected to my present office with a majority of 86%. I suspect that's one of the highest majorities in the country. But my mandate was for 5 years. That was the contract between the electorate and me as a councillor. They elected me for 5 years. I can't then, as an elected official, arbitrarily extend my own term of office without a mandate from the people. And so what I was going to say to the committee members is follow my example. I've said publicly, and I say it again today, that my term as a councillor is 5 years. Come the end of that 5 years, whether this bill is passed or not, my term will finish, because that is the moral and the correct thing to do. And I urge honourable members, if they are people of integrity, if this is not subjected to a referendum, if they do not get the mandate of the people, then at the end of their 5 years, they should stand down as I will. So you will see from this that in the short time that we've had available today, I have not had time to go into the detail of this. But suffice it to say, and let me conclude by saying that I have multiple objections to it. And I urge parliamentarians to vote this down when it eventually comes to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dev. Any questions, guys?
But who can?
There's a question on the paper.
You guys, we are not I want a contract, but contract, want to draw where a contract.
Interesting and passionate statements there from the mayor of Bulawayo, Doug Coulthard, with regards to the constitutional amendment consultations, keeping in mind that just yesterday his own son was assaulted in front of everybody during one of the constitutional hearings. His son is a lawyer and does represent several opposition figures, and he was assaulted by a man named Lakmo Gapa, who is a part of ZANU-PF Central Committee. And this was in full view during these exact same consultation meetings. So, of course, there is an implosion that is currently underway, and we'll be paying attention to the political situation in Zimbabwe. But for now, let's have a look at the weather before Rorisang Mogojwe guides us into Botswana. Constitutional Amendment Bill number 14 in Botswana has been a bit of a contentious subject, but not necessarily in Parliament, because the bill was passed, which is going to pave way for Botswana to be able to then establish a constitutional court, of course, barring a referendum, which must also happen, and of course assent from the president. But speaking from the president, this has been one of the cornerstone ideals, agendas that has been pushed by President Duma Boko, and this was him speaking about this particular bill earlier in the year.
That led to the decision to establish a constitutional court. The second level of the discourse in relation to the constitutional court is this. After the constitution is crafted and it has been discussed and debated extensively across the breadth and dimensions of the Republic. What happens to that document? Where does it go for acceptance? Where does it go? The approach, and this is what South Africa did, to create a platform where, after you have settled it amongst yourselves and the public, the Constitutional Court now is seized with ratification, examining it and saying, this is the Constitution, and certifying, giving effect to that Constitution, so that it then supplants and removes and replaces whatever pre-existed or predated that certification. This is the logic of the establishment of a constitutional court before the review, so that the process of the adoption of the Constitution therefore becomes seamless, becomes easy. In Zimbabwe, you know that there was a rejection after a constitution had been discussed. It was sent back to the people. And different viewpoints. And the Constitution is an emotive issue, by the way. I want to alert you. Some of these tribes that are entrenched in the Constitution have inveighed, spoken vociferously against the inclusion of others. You see the problem? It's an emotive issue. So we want, once we have settled, because if we don't treat it with circumspection, a lot of these other communities will remain marginalized, because the dominant in society will vote against inclusion and we'll have a crisis.
And now this is the moment Botswana's parliament voted in favor of the bill.
Here are the results of your voting. Present, you are 66 in the House. The ayes, 50. The noes, 15. Abstain, 0. One did not participate. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The bill is passed. The bill is passed. You have fulfilled your...
All right, and here is Rorisang Mogojwe. Talk to us about this contentious bill.
The bill is going to pave way for the establishment of the Constitutional Court of Botswana, which is going to have exclusive jurisdiction over matters of the Constitution, including human rights cases, election petitions, and just the general interpretation of the Constitution. Another thing that it's going to pave way for is the establishment or the introduction of the new role or position of Deputy Chief Justice. Now, when we talk about public sentiment, it's mixed reviews. Of course, the general sentiment is that the economic priorities of the government are not really fully aligned to the people. You know, they are saying that why now when the people are struggling? Just a few days ago, we experienced a fuel price hike, a hike in fuel prices, and today public transportation fares will also be going up, and surely food prices are also going to follow right behind. And so now the people are saying that this should not even be a priority on government's list right now because, you know, of the economic struggles that people are facing. And, top concerns of the government should be the rising cost of living, the medication shortages in hospitals, and weak service delivery in public service institutions. And another thing is the funding. Really, members of the public are questioning where the funding is going to come from. Funding for the Constitutional Court, they are saying, should be, which is 275 million pula, as the government says. And so the public is saying that these funds should instead be going to healthcare, to food security, to infrastructure, bread and butter issues, instead of establishing a constitutional court, which is really not the right time right now. Analysts are also saying that there was not enough public consultation made. Civil society as well as other opposition parties are saying that there was not enough public consultation, and so there is a general lack of public education and awareness on this matter. And of course the proponents or the supporters of this bill, as well as the Constitutional Court, being President Duma Boko, of course, is his pet project, as well as his government, are actually saying that no, it is the Constitutional Court is long overdue, and especially because it's going to specialize in constitutional interpretation, and it will also protect human rights and check government power more effectively. And President Duma Boko has in the past, when he's advocating for the establishment of the Concord, he says that it will improve accountability as well as strengthen the rule of law and provide a clear forum for constitutional disputes. So as you can see, there is mixed reviews and mixed feelings and mixed opinions. However, the government or the members of parliament did actually pass the amendment bill by a very strong majority, 50 votes in favor, 15 against, and 1 who chose not to vote. And so these proposed changes are now going to be taken to a national referendum, where Botswana will then decide if the amendments should take effect. And like I mentioned, that government actually estimates that the referendum will cost about 275 million pula, which members of the public are questioning where it will come from, because the government has come out many times to announce that the national coffers are depleted. The government of Botswana is broke. And so the question is, where will that money come from? And if we do have that money, it should instead be channeled towards bread and butter, services, including healthcare, education, infrastructure, and the general public service.
All right, we're going to be wrapping up the show just as Rorisang will be getting into the last update. DSTV 285, GoTV 25, 1up2.com, Network Media Hub, and ntvafrica.my.na are precisely where you can watch Africa Good Morning. Tomorrow we will return with news from South Africa as Ari Hochad joins us tomorrow, amongst other stories from broader Africa. Now, we know that in Namibia, Rorisang, we had long fuel queues. A lot of fuel stations reported that they did not have fuel. The Ministry of Mines and Energy also put out a notice saying that service stations should stop withholding fuel. Basically, all of this, as we know, is coming from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, please talk to us about the fuel hikes in Botswana as we say goodbye.
Yeah, when it rains, it pours, Ashwin. It seems things are going from bad to worse here in Botswana, especially for the regular Botswana that is currently struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. Today, this morning, commuters will be waking up to an increase in public transportation fares as operators pass the impact onto the consumers, the impact of the rising fuel prices onto consumers and commuters. Now, this increase follows a comprehensive review that was undertaken by the government, which was triggered by escalating operational costs across the transport sector. The Botswana Bus Operators Association says that this increase was unavoidable, citing the recent petrol and diesel price hike as a major strain on operators. Now, this fare review comes after a planned strike by the transport operators was called off If you recall, we reported about this in December when the transport operators had planned to down tools as we were heading into the festive season, citing that operational costs of the transport sector were becoming too much. And so the Ministry of Transport eventually agreed to have a sit down, to have a conversation. And this is when the planned strike was called off. And this is when it was also decided that a review would be undertaken, which essentially and eventually led to this adjustment, which will be effected from today, the 1st of April, as this is the beginning of the financial year of the government. Now, these new fares will apply to buses, taxis, and combis nationwide, and operators are actually warning that further increases might actually occur if fuel prices across the world continue to rise.